Howdy, y'all. Okie Poker Player here, and doing somewhat of a test video um, on the site Advanced Poker Training using their poker sim, and mainly just doing this little test video to make sure that my OBS setup, that I understand it, that it's working fine. But I also wanted to give you guys an idea of this really slick and useful, in my opinion, uh, poker sim. I think the poker play on this sim is extremely realistic as far as some of the games that I've played, both live and online. Um, if you like going on tilt, this this game can put you on tilt pretty quick because you'll see some pretty crazy hands. Um, anyway, um, um, at the 2-5 table on Advanced Poker Training, they call it Chips on the Beach. They consider it an easy level. They have lots of different levels here you can play, so you can up your game uh, when you want some more challenge. And I'll tell you, these really are very accurate when it comes to style of play, difficulty of play. I played all of these, and um, with my style of play, I'm actually a little more successful at the medium levels. Now, the reason being is the medium levels play like medium level regs, medium level pros and grinders. Um, they're thinking players. So if you're making some optimal type plays in your game, they're normally going to work out pretty well. If your game is not optimal, these medium guys are going to run over you pretty easily. I would say the easy is somewhat similar, where if you're playing an optimal strategy, then you can get by pretty well. Um, if you start trying to be exploitative without understanding or knowing the opponents at the table, you're not going to do very well. Um, these guys are somewhat easy to exploit, but it's also easy to fall into the trap of trying to play exploitative and then having them become, changing to your game essentially and become calling stations or themselves start to exhibit some unexpected aggression. The hard and the very hard, uh, you're going to get challenged here all the time. If you play 5, 10, 10, 20 regularly, I think that you'll find this level probably to your satisfaction as far as a challenge is concerned. The hardest level is just as you'd expect. These guys are gonna call you down with air sometimes if they think you're bluffing and they think their air is better air than yours. So uh, it's it's gonna be, as it shows here, the most difficult level of play. Anyway, on to our game. So you can do different player mixes, um, and this kind of can depend on, maybe you're getting prepared for a certain poker room or a certain poker site, and you know that on this poker site, most of the players are fish. They're going to be passive. They're going to be folding their aggression a lot. They're going to be somewhat nits, but not really um, what some might call in the poker world nut peddlers. And what that means is these are nut peddlers or players that don't necessarily play a nit style game. Their range isn't super tight. They may be tight players. They may be aggressive players, but they're very rarely going to bluff, and they're always going to be betting with the nuts. They're going to be very aggressive with the nuts. They're not going to play. They're not going to play their hand very deceptively. They're going to be somewhat face up in their play. But again, you want to kind of go against this kind of opponent in practice so that when you meet them in real life, you know how to exploit them. And with nut pillars, it's pretty easy when they're being aggressive and they're check raising you, or they're maybe a lot of times what I've seen is they'll call you down to the river and then jam on the river, and almost 100% of the time they're going to have the nuts. So if you don't have the nuts and are going to chop with them, then you're better off folding. But on the flip side of that, this can teach you to control the pot. If you're in position or even out of position, in an out of position situation where you are playing against a nut peddler, and you're checking to them and they're making pot size bets. It's time to fold. Move on to the next hand. Don't give them action when all they want to do is play the nuts. Don't let them get rich off of your aggression or mistakes. So more passive than normal. You're going to have a couple of players at the table that might be aggressive, but most of the players at the table are going to be pretty nitty and fold happy. Average is actually, this is interesting because average, and it says optimal. I'm going to say optimal for the stakes that you're playing. So a guy who plays 2-5 and plays optimally is going to be somebody who might average something like 10 big blinds 100. That might be a little bit high. Let's say they average about 7 or 8 big blinds 100 hands. So if they're raking in 7, 8 big blinds 100 hands, they're not doing too bad. They're playing fairly optimally, and this type of player for each of the different levels that you see, they're going to play an optimal game for that level. So if your competition at the casino, poker room, poker site that you're playing at, if you know that they're competent opponents, get yourself prepared using this type of opponent. If you're going to a room where there's a bunch of nutballs out there, just crazy ass players, then do one of the aggressive opponents, and this will get you prepared for them. Unknown. The reason I would suggest doing unknown is to teach you or train you to, as you're playing, become aware of the opponents at your table by taking mental notes. Heck, you might even want to have a notepad or something next to you, and not just take mental notes, but take some actual notes. Write it down. Player 2 calls light. Player 4 is loose aggressive. Player 5 is super tight and aggressive. You use those poker character traits that we all understand to get a good line on what the way your opponents play. So if you're not familiar with those, you have two different types of poker players. You have passive and aggressive. And a passive poker player is one that's going to be folding to aggression a lot. They're going to be checking and calling a lot. They're going to be, they're not going to be 3-betting or 4-betting hardly ever. They might raise occasionally, but if they're a passive player and they're raising, then that kind of allows you to see their hand. They're going to be playing face up when they're raising. So passive players are kind of a poker player's dream, because the more passive players you have at your table, and if you're an aggressive thinking player playing optimally, you can do really well at that type of table. Of course, aggressive is obviously the opposite of that. They're going to be raising pre-flop. They're going to be 3-betting pre-flop, sometimes even 4 or 5-betting on the flops and the continuing streets. They might continue that aggression with c-bets, check raises, plays that are going to put their opponents to very difficult decisions. And that's the type of player you want to be. You want to be aggressive. You don't want to be passive. You also want to kind of adjust your game from a perspective of being tight or loose. And those are going to be reflected by your range, what type of range you play. If you're a tight poker player, and some people use the term tight is right, and that may be right in some cases, may not be in others. But anyway, a tight player is going to have a much more narrow range of starting hands than their loose counterparts. Loose players are going to open up their range. They're going to play a lot of what might seem like trash hands, but to them, they're hands that, from their experience or what their play style determines, catch the board quite a bit. Some people might question these types of hands, but they're going to be hands like gapped connectors. Suited gapped hands. So something like 5-7 of hearts, 7-9 of spades, 10-7 of diamonds. Hands that most poker players would consider trash hands, they might consider value. They're also going to be playing the things like suited wheels and small pairs in earlier streets sometimes. So essentially, they're going to be a much wider range than their tight playing counterparts. So you can have a little quadrant box and have your tight aggressive, tight passive in one area, loose aggressive, loose passive in another, and then you can start kind of boxing your opponents into those different categories, just to give you a quick and dirty visual as to what style of player they are. And that is a good starting point to how you're going to play against them. So a very loose, aggressive opponent, you might be calling them down more. You might become a little more passive against them. It might seem like you're playing passive, but in actuality, you're just meeting their aggression. It's kind of the old fighting fire with fire analogy. Except if you're really fighting fire with fire, then with super aggressive players, you're going to want to ramp that aggression up as your hand builds equity on later streets. So you might allow them to bluff the flop, but they're not going to be bluffing the turn and river, because some of these loose aggressive players are thinking players, and they might be aggressive because of a wide. They're playing with a wide range. They might be aggressive with a certain part of that range being nutted, but a lot of that range is going to be bluffs. So when the majority of their range is bluffs and they're showing aggression on the flop, but the turn doesn't bring any extra value to their expected range, but it does increase the value of your hand. And that's where you start to punish those loose aggressive players and start doing things like check raising, or maybe even just putting them to the test and shoving all in, see what their response is. And that's where I'm going back to these different player types here. These are going to allow you to learn to make those kind of plays against these type of players at all of these different levels. All right. So I've gone on quite a bit about the setup. There's other settings here. You have different advisors you can choose, and they're going to give you different type of advice. We'll go over that in later videos, but right now I just want to kind of focus on the regular game tree. So for a regular game, you're going to want to deal to all positions, all hand types. You can change this up. This way you can practice different positions. You can practice different types of hands. You can even enter a custom list of hands. So you can say that you might have a certain part of your range that's somewhat marginal, that when you play them pre-flop, then on the flop they're either going to become value hands in some cases, but in most cases they're going to continue to be marginal or maybe even be candidates for bluffs. Then enter that range of hands into your custom list, right? And then let's say we want to do that from a middle position, because that's kind of a tough position to play. So you can play it anywhere from under the gun to hijack. All right, and low jack might be the best to play it, because it gives you a chance to have three people in front of you who might be raising. And are you calling with these marginal hands too much? Are you maybe needing to start to 3-bet a little more in some cases as a bluff, because the guys after you are passive players and are going to fold to a 3-bet, and then you can possibly isolate one of those raisers, or maybe even just take down the pot there pre-flop sometimes. Essentially getting value for marginal hands is something you want to think about. So we'll play all positions, all hand types. You can choose when your opponents reload. Going to be discussing with the guys at Advanced Poker Training about maybe getting some deep stack games in here, because right now 1.5 or 150 big blinds is the most you can go at any of these levels. And quite honestly, in a lot of places around the country now, 200 big blinds for a 2-5 game is fairly common. 300 big blinds I've seen all over the place. And then you also have some uncapped games. So we'll see if we can get that through. But in the meantime, practice with, I would practice with, the maximum chips you can bring to the table against your opponents. So don't necessarily want to practice short stack all the time, but you can. And all you have to do here is just choose how many chips you bring to the table. So, for a 2-5 game, you want to make your minimum what the range is for the room that you're going. So if the room that you're going to, the range is 200 to to 1,000. You know, starting with 750 is pretty good, but if you want to start short stack, you know, start at like 300 or maybe 400. You can start at 200 if you want to, but honestly, I don't think you'd want to start that short. So let's go ahead and jump in the game at 750 and play a little poker. Okay. So first thing is I can go to full screen here. So I'm going to do that. And so you can see they have some pretty familiar buttons. So pretty similar to a lot of the different poker rooms, online poker that you'll play. Give me just 1 second, guys. Okay, so remember I was talking about those suited gapped hands? Now here you have a button player who is raising after a couple 3 limps. And what I found at this level is a lot of times that's a very smart player who is trying to take down the dead money. So would you want to call here with 5-7? No, most of the time you probably want to just fold it and let it go. But in this case, knowing that we might have some, passive players here. So there's a passive guy there. There's a passive guy there. They're passive. So our only aggressive player is Dorothy here. And Dorothy is kind of doing the right thing. She's trying to take down the money. But we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So we're going to bump it up. We're going to make it 109. We're going to see if we can take it down right here. Well, didn't work for us, but hey, what do you know? We flopped some equity on the flop here. So let's go ahead and continue our aggression into the aggressive player. So again, like I was talking about before, fight fire with fire. So we'll check here, see if she bets. And she does. So there's 381 in the pot. We call 146. We're getting a little better than 2-1. We have 2 pair here, and we're probably from a range perspective, beating her all the time. So we can go ahead and make this say 3/4 of the pot. It's going to be 542. That's really only going to leave us, not even another pot size bet. So we might as well just go ahead and pot it. That's going to be an all in, and see if we can take this down now. Nope. Looks like she had something. Yep. It's okay. So we'll have to rebuy. And the cool thing is you can rebuy during the game just like you could at any casino, or when you donk out like I just did. We're sitting on the small blind now, ace jack, a lot of money in the middle. We need to be taking this down. So we're going to pot it, and then we're going to add a big blind bet to each. So pot plus 30 is 70. See if we can take this down right now. So again, we've got a lot of passive players on this table. So we're going to continue our aggression in position and continue to pot this plus each time we see that type of play. So again, we have basically 5 callers, 42. So again, we'll do 65 this time. See what that does. Okay. 1 caller. We've got an 8. He checks to us. So let's make it a third. See a third. We get a call. Flush comes, so we'll go ahead and check. Pretty good chance that they have the flush. So R8's really no good. One of the cool things about this simulator is there's a couple of things you can do. Here's some of the menus. So you can change the speed of play, which is beneficial, so you can get more hands in per hour if you want to, or you can slow the play down so you can analyze it a little more. You can do a zip to end, kind of like turbo play online or jackpot play on something like Bet Online or whatnot. And then also you can do a peek at end, which lets you peek at the other player's cards. So let's say you fold, but you want to see, what the opponent was playing. Well, you can do that with the peek at end, but you can also do that here, where if you just click on the player's cards, you'll see. And what do you know? It's a pretty nice heart there, huh? So we were actually good until the river, but we're not good anymore. And of course, he's given us all kinds of odds to call, but that's pretty face up, in my opinion. So we'll just fold that. All right. So again, what I was talking about before, where you can buy in. Let's say we get down to let's see if we get down to less than 500 chips. If we get down to less than 500 chips, then I'll go ahead and buy in. We'll deal. I'm just going to go ahead and fold this. This is a trash can. We can watch play. Good fold. And pair of deuces, middle position. So I would consider this one of those marginal type hands. Although we're in middle position, we are in the hijack. So I'm sorry. Yeah, we're in the hijack. So we could consider taking this down right now. Get a pot level bet, see if we can take it down, or we could just call. In some cases, you might want to just call with your marginals, and then maybe turn it into a bluff if somebody raises behind you, trying to take the dead money. But in this case, if you're this late and everybody's folded in front of you, I would say potting it, see if we can go ahead and take it down now would be, got some value with our marginal hand. Fold. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our menu here, and I'm going to change this to zip to end so we can get through these hands a little quicker. Another thing you can do, this little peek at end option, you can do this as well if you hold down the fold button. So I'm going to click on the fold button, and it's going to say fold and peek. So now when I fold, I'm going to see what hands my opponents had, what the board ran out, to give me an indication of was my fold good or not. I guess it would have been, but still, playing Jack 5 from early position, suited or unsuited, is not optimal. Okay, so we got a limp in front of us. We got a pretty good pair, so we're going to go ahead and pot it and add 5. And this is kind of a strategy I've been using for a while in this game specifically, but also in my online and live games. That's kind of worked, because what I can do is a lot of times when I do that, I can just take down the pot right there pre-flop, take the dead money, move on to the next hand. In other cases, like this, I can flop some equity, and here I have. So I could be up against any of those pairs, honestly. So I could be up against a set here. In this case, a lot of times, probably 80% of the time with this hand, out of position against a thinking player, I'm gonna check call, or in some cases check raise. But in this case, I'm just going to check call. See if I can see a turn. So they're going to give me about 2 to 1. I've got a middle pair and a draw. That's not a bad call. Okay, that's not a great card to see. So we'll check it again. They check back. Now they've checked back on the turn. They're giving us an opening here. So we're going to 3/4 pot it. See if we can take it down. Well, not a great call. Okay. So we're down to less than 500. So what we can do now is go to chips, and it's going to tell us you'll be able to get more chips at the end of this current hand. Well, that's trash. We're folding. We're going to go ahead and chip back up. So we jump back up to 750 chips, jump in the big blind, and again, a lot of limping to me. Got a somewhat marginal hand, but I want to try and take it down. So I'm going to do that. We're going to add 20, make this 5, raise, get 1 call. Good, king flops. So we'll make it half. Okay. Not too bad. I mean, that's not really a scare card for me. It actually might have helped me because if they have, say, an ace-10 or some type of 10x that isn't 2 pair right now, you know, we're going to get some value. So we're going to actually bump the bet up a little bit to 3/4 pot and we take it down. All right, again, you can quick fold pretty much any time. Ever folding jacks. So we're going to pot it, add 20, so we'll say 60. Bet it, and we get 2 colors. So we're going to go ahead and put this guy in. He might have a 10. Somewhat loose aggressive, so they're going to be betting with some equity. They might have a draw to the diamonds. But I want to get these guys out and isolate this loose aggro. So let's go ahead and raise it. Hey, what do you know? We took it down. Let's just fold this. Queen 8 from middle position again. Queen 8 suited. We have 1 limper here. We might want to just go ahead and limp in here. Turn it into a bluff if we need to. All right, so now we have a call and a raise. And this is our loose aggressive beginner, but quite honestly, she's already shown that she will be aggressive with value. So again, if you're interested in just seeing how good your read is, you know, go ahead and click that hand every once in a while. So let's think about this. You know, we have 2 overs here, pretty much flopped nothing. So we have almost no equity. And you can check your equity here because you can take advice. Okay, and when you take advice, they're going to tell you to fold. But what you can do is when you do advice, it shows your equity, okay, against the other players. So obviously the best equity I have against all of these callers is about 35%. And quite honestly, you want to go with, you know, your lowest equity. So we're 20% equity against the re-raiser here, the 3-better. I'm sorry, the raiser. And no reason to call this at all. So we'll just go ahead and fold. And again, if you want to see what their range might be, you click on show range, and it's going to give an idea. You know, they're probably going to have 1 pair most of the time. They're very rarely going to have 2 pair. Sometimes have trips or a set. On occasion, they'll just have overcards to the board. But for the most part, you're going to be up against either overcards or a pair. And quite honestly, Queen 8 doesn't play good on this board at all. Even if you hit your queen, you know, Queen Jack is in their range. There's even more in their range here. So, you know, they might have other queens in their range. Not very often, but you know, they could have other queens. Queen Jack. You have some Queen X essentially that is going to be better than yours, better than your queen. So just good idea to fold this hand. All right, so trash, we're going to fold. Queen 9 offsuit, and early position we're folding. Queen 9 suited to a limp, and we'll go ahead and call. Okay. Now we've flopped a gut shot, and what I've seen a lot of times is these bets and raises, in some cases, don't necessarily mean that they have anything against this board. Okay. This person who's very aggressive is betting. They're going to be c-betting like almost 100% of the time. This person who is a loose aggressive beginner as well, of course, is raising, and they could be raising with air 50% of the time. Okay. The rest of these folks are all pretty passive. 2 out of 3 of them are passive. I'm going to pretty much guarantee you they're going to fold. So if we were to re-raise here, we might be able to take this pot down right here on the flop. And because we have some equity here, we have a backdoor flush draw, we have a gut shot straight, hopefully to the nut straight if the 7 comes, right? Or we could get even better equity on the turn if maybe a 10 of clubs or jack of clubs or something like that comes, and then we're drawing to a straight flush. So a call would be good here, probably about, I'd say, more than 50% of the time. But again, do you want to call and risk having, say, loose aggressive here from Sunnyvale, California, jam all in? Then what do? You can't really call the jam with that hand. So again, we can look at our equity if we want to. So let's click on the advisor, and we actually have pretty good equity. Now our equity against the re-raiser is going to be low because they're showing aggression. But as I was saying, there's a lot of instances where this doesn't necessarily mean we're going against somebody who's hit this board. All right, and so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and 3/4 pot it, see if we can take it down. Aha, what do you know? Kind of what I thought could happen. Now we have 2 all-ins. Now we're kind of in a pickle. We need to call 697 effective. No, I'm sorry, not that much. We need to call around 450 effective into a pot of 1500. So we're getting like 3-to-1 to call here. There's our call, 446. So we're getting about 3-to-1 to call here. I mean, honestly, for me, this is a 50-50 situation. I think we're looking at either a flop straight against, maybe an overpair. But if we were to hit, we could win a lot of money here. But again, we can go ahead and take a look. So yeah, exactly what I thought. So we have flop straight against an overpair. No, not necessarily an overpair. This is more of just an idiot call. But anyway, yeah. I mean, the best we're gonna do here is most likely chop. We'll be chopping his money, but still against a flop straight, we have to fold. So you're not going to be able to do that in real life, obviously, but by doing it here in a simulated environment and understanding your reads, understanding your expected value and all of that stuff for things like a call to 2 shoves where you're getting 3 or 4-to-1 to call, and you have both players covered. But still, if I would have called there, most likely I'm not going to catch, and it's going to leave my stack pretty much crippled. So, I want to keep as much equity in my stack as I can. 5-3 suited, under the gun, folding. Okay. So again, what we have here is the possibility of a raise here to grab dead money, okay? But we have a really trash hand, and quite honestly, we're not gonna try our little trick where we pot it to, because we think that he might be bluffing, because sometimes he isn't bluffing, okay? Sometimes he's raising for value, all right? And if we were to pot it again, I know most of these guys are passive. They're probably going to fold. But this one right here is not passive. And if they have any type of hand, yeah, they're not going to call with that. We have another aggressive here. They probably won't call. But what we can do is we can undo our zip to end. And we can fold here. And we can watch it play out. So we actually got several calls there. Our ace wins. Ace queen wins. Now, what I thought was interesting is the fact that, ace queen, why would ace queen check that flop with 4 people behind him when he flopped a lot of equity? I mean, yeah, somebody could have 2 pair 9-8. Somebody could have flopped 2 pair, possibly. But you kind of want to, especially multi-way, you kind of want to find out where you're at, right? So if I had that ace queen and I had 4 people call me, to a flop raise, and I flop that much on the flop, yeah, I'm putting in probably a 2/3, 3/4 pot bet to see if I'm getting called most of the time. So again, pretty trashy hand, but we kind of got a discount, right? Because we're in the small blind, so we'll go ahead and call. Didn't really flop anything, so early position. I'm gonna check it around, see if we, so we can fold now. Okay, let's go ahead and turn off our zip to end. And what we can do here is we can actually turn the speed down a little bit, so that we can kind of watch play as it goes, because the zip to end is going to be pretty fast if we're folding pre-flop. Okay, ace-7 on the button. This is a call here. He's probably going to say fold. Yeah, but quite honestly, I'm not folding an ace. I know it's a trashy ace, but still, with the expectation that it's going to go, call check, in the blinds. They're passive. They're not going to raise. So we flop an ace. Everybody checks to us. So we can do, say, $12 and take it down. We got a call. Good. So let's go 32. All right. Trash hand. Pretty trashy hand. This is a call hand in this case. Now again, we're calling with the intention of possibly 3-bet bluffing if we get a raise after us. Again, the raise that comes after us a lot of times is going to be these players trying to take down dead money pre-flop because of all the limps before them. So we want to do this with a good amount of equity, and also hands that kind of play well against monsters. And to be honest, 8-7 suited is a hand that plays, it's one of the best hand that plays against monsters, queens, kings, and aces, better than any other hand in the deck. You can look it up. I'm not lying to you. This hand flops more equity against kings, queens, kings, and aces than pretty much any other hand in the deck. So again, we're going to call, see if we get a raise. Okay, so got a backdoor straight, backdoor flush. So we've got a little bit of equity here. It's worth making a stab at it. So $30 in the pot. With multiple players, you kind of want to go a little higher than half most of the time. So we'll make it 18. Okay, now we've isolated. All right, now we flopped a straight draw and a flush draw. So we're going to pretty much jam this pot. Actually, let's bring it down a little bit, make it 45. Okay, look at that. Ooh, gin. I love catching gin. So, say 70. See if we can get a call. Nope. So we're good. Again, another card, honestly, that can play well against some monsters. So another hand that plays well against some monsters. So we're going to do this again. See if we can make that sneaky little. Okay. So we've actually flopped some equity here. Straight flush draw equity. So backdoor straight, backdoor flush. We might be up against some monsters here, so we're going to have to consider the turn as another. We're going to consider this as a float for the turn and hope to catch some equity and maybe be able to jam on the river if we catch our equity. Okay, so we're floating this to possibly make a bluff on the turn if they give up on the turn. All right, so we'll call here. Hey, there's that equity I was talking about. Okay, now that we have the extra equity, we might be able to actually turn our hand into a bluff here. But sometimes you might not want to do that because you might be up against, you could be up against Queen 10 here. I'm thinking more along the lines of some type of ace X, king X. He might have two pair now, ace jack, king jack. He could have a flush draw. And if he has a flush draw, then you're up against it with the flush draw. So do you want the flush draw to come out? Or do you want to just take it down now? But what I'm thinking is we've got somewhat of a passive player here. They're not going to be doing this with air. So we're looking at some type of ace X. So let's see how good my read is. What do you know? They are doing it with a flush draw. Anyway, let's go with our read. Let's pretend that we put them on ace X because we want to, when we're playing poker, guys, we don't want to try to put people on hands. We want to play the range game. All right. Put your opponent on certain ranges. As play progresses, you can narrow that range down, and that range can either become nutted, which means that they're holding all the best cards that hit the deck, or it can become a marginal type range where they're when they bet they might be just betting for marginal value, or it could be a very polarized range where they might have some nutted hands, ace king, queen 10, stuff like that, but they could also have bluff candidates like this. So this person is playing a pretty polarized range here. I mean, 8-3. It was limped pre-flop, but still, that's somewhat polar. So again, we're going to put them on the ace and call. And now they're giving up on the river because that 7 comes out. They don't get their flush. They think that you might have the nut hands now. So usually when this happens, especially with passive players, if you remember, passive players fold to aggression. So we're going to bluff half pot and see if we can get this through. Okay. Kind of a foregone conclusion, but it's a good example of how you can turn your marginal hands into a bluff and make some money on the river. Turn a river. Okay, so ace 10 under the gun. I would say this is a call about 20% of the time, a fold about 70% of the time, and maybe a raise 10% of the time. If you feel like you played better post flop against most of your opponents, go ahead and call, and let's see if it can either limp through or there you go. So we actually catch some equity here. So we've got a backdoor straight flush draw. We've got an over. There's a lot of aggression being shown right here. So we've got this guy who has shown before that he can do this, with a wide range of hands. So he may have that Jack 8 again, hearts, and he's bluffing here. So this would be a float situation where if I called, I'm floating the turn to try and, hopefully isolate our aggressor and see if we can take it down at the turn. But with the two players behind who have called, I think folding here is going to be the best course of action. And I'm going to expect possibly a call or raise behind me. Nope, he took it down. What do you take it down with? What do you know? So now we know that this guy right here is kind of a nutball. He's kind of a crazy ass player. So we've seen two hands already where he's semi bluffed into people and is called down very, very thin. So we might have to start ramping up our aggression against this player. All right. So let's go ahead. Fold. To see the run out there, so deal. Right, again, we have limps to us all around, and we have, this is a hand that I'm gonna do this with a lot of times. So basically 7 callers. So 35 extra, so that'll be 80. Take down the dead money. Okay, this is total trash. I'm not even playing it for a discount. King 8 on the button is another one of those that I might do our little bluff action here. Raising after 3 limps, again, to me, is one of those, trying to catch the dead money play. So what we can do here is re-raise, hopefully take it down. If we get called, we'll have to evaluate a turn. If we get re-raised, we'll fold. So we'll go ahead and re-raise this to 90. Now I'm going to make it 95. And see if we can take it down. All right. So that's going to be actually successful probably more than 60% of the time here. Again, this guy right here, honestly, I'm going to do this to him every time. So let's make it 90 this time, but yeah. This guy, again, we're going to ramp up our aggression against him. He's shown to be just a nutball whose range is a 52-card deck. So maybe even a 54-card deck. If he had a couple of jokers in there and the jokers didn't have any equity at all, he'd be playing them. So King Jack, offsuit, probably good for a fold most of the time. But since we know there's a lot of passive players behind us, let's go ahead and call and evaluate a turn. So we got a king on the turn, which is good. So we can make it, say, $11. Call. Inconsequential 6. So we'll go 32. Okay, trash hand, fold. All right, so I'm going to stop the demo right here. We're 35 hands in. You can stop the demo by hitting the X here. It'll tell you, are you sure you want to quit and save your results now? We'll say yes. Now, one of the things I'm going to show you guys later on in some later videos on this simulator is this real poker skill evaluation that they have here. You need at least 100 hands to get this evaluated. But there's still some statistics it'll give you. So we had 34 hands dealt. Our VPIP was really high. And honestly, when you're at a table where there's a lot of loose passive players, your VPIP should be high. Your pre-flop raise, that's actually kind of low. It should be a little higher than that. It says it should be half your VPIP, but again, that's kind of at a optimal table. We were at a passive table, so we should be pre-flop raising much more often than that. I think I limped a couple of times where I should have actually been raising. But this is a pretty important factor right here, aggression factor. So you want this aggression factor to be fairly high. I would say 3.5 at almost any level is a good aggression factor. Yeah, you're going to be if you're playing a tight, aggressive game, and again, it's kind of a poker rule of thumb, tight is right, and aggression is right. So you combine having a good, solid range with putting your opponents to the test as often as possible, and I can guarantee you that you're gonna see success with that strategy. So how many times did the hand go to showdown? So it says if it's below 17%, that's not really good. They want you to be between 17 and 25%. A lot of this has to do with the fact that we had a very few number of hands, and I was able to get people to fold a lot. All right. So my C-bet, how many times did I C-bet? 50% of the time, but I should be doing it more. Quite honestly, 70 to 90 in a passive game is about where you want to be. Most of the time, you want to be around 65 to 75%, depending on the table. We didn't really have to defend any C-bets, so that's why we don't have any stats there. We also, I guess, because we didn't have a lot of hands go to showdown, or the hands that did go to showdown, we lost. I think it was one of the all-ins, right? So it's about the only hand that went to showdown. Oh, this is another kind of cool thing, is your all-in luck rating. So how lucky were you when you or your opponent went all in? Well, we weren't very lucky, of course. We got ran over. All right, so we 3-bet. It says 100% of the time. Basically, this should be in most games, 25 to 30%, and this is going to be on any. I'm sorry, it is on pre-flop. Okay, so it is pre-flop 3-bet. So you want to start your aggression early. How many times did you defend the 3-bet? I didn't really have to defend the 3-bet because I don't think we ever got 3-bet with a hand to defend with. We did defend the raise, of course. We did 3-bet. How often are we defending a steal? So when somebody raises, And quite honestly, this is wrong. I didn't do this 0%. I defended the steal like 3 times, so more like 10%. Um, but it says, let's see, this is a percent of hands where you were in the big blind and you defended against someone attempting to steal the blinds. And they define an attempt to steal the blinds as any raise from cutoff button or small blind if no other player has entered the pot. Okay, so they have a pretty specific definition for that. We didn't really have to 4-bet at all, so that's going to be it. So this is our check raise flop. How often did we check raise a flop? And we did it a little more than what the normal is, but again, that's because we're up against a lot of passive players, a lot of loose aggressive players, so we want that to be fairly high. And then our big blinds per 100, of course, is not all that great because we lost $412. This also gives you chips per 100 hands, but I would be more interested in tracking your big blinds per 100. And you can do that in advanced poker training by going to your reports, and your reports is going to show your big blinds per 100. So I'm normally pretty good at this level. It also gives you some information on, how smart are you playing. So if you want to know a little bit more about that, you can go into their glossary here, and it'll tell you about real poker IQ and what that means. Okay, so let's go back. And again, they have lots of different simulators here. They have 9 max, 6 max, heads up, sit and go, multi-table, practice final tables. There's some cool challenges here. There's also other users that you can play against in public games and private games, and you can track your game results here right on the site. So I'll be leaving a link in the instructions down here for you guys to sign up if you'd like. I would appreciate it. And I would also appreciate a subscription and a like for the video if you like the video. Thank you very much.